Welcome back. If you just joined us, you're watching the news at 10 on Channels Television, coming to you live from Lagos. A reminder of our top stories. Tragedy hits Kano as suicide bomber and 11 others die after a blast in a GSM market. Former National Security Advisor Sambo Dasuki replies presidency. President Muhammadu Buhari writes to National Assembly, sends supplementary budget worth 465.6 billion naira for passage. And a woman blows herself up and another suspect shot dead by the police in a hunt for the masterminds of the terrorist attacks in Paris. Well, we can now share with you some of those pictures that you sent in to us. Now, we begin with this dilapidated classroom at a Hawul Community School in Hawul local government area, Borno State. Our eyewitness reporter is calling on the state authorities to help give the entire school a facelift. Next is this picture of a road accident which occurred in Kubwa district in Abuja. Our eyewitness reporter wants the Federal Road Safety Corps to intensify its campaign. And this photo showing traffic was taken along Old Ojo Road in Amuodofin, Lagos State. Our eyewitness reporter wants state authorities to help find a permanent parking space for tankers to end the long hours spent on this road. Finally, we received this picture from our eyewitness reporter at the University of Ilorin, Kwara State. Our reporter is calling on the institution's management to help resolve the hardship being faced by students, especially between the hours of 4 and 8 p.m. Well, thanks a lot for sending in all your pictures, and we expect you to send us some more. The President, Muhammadu Buhari, has sent a supplementary budget of 465.6 billion naira to the National Assembly for appropriation. The President also sought for an upward review of the initial 882.1 billion naira borrowing in the 2015 budget to 2.103 trillion naira to finance the budget. Of the 465.6 billion naira supplementary budget, a total of 413.363 billion has been earmarked as payment for subsidy for premium motor spirit. Well, Nigeria's GDP figures have been released and it seems to be looking good. For an analysis of various sectors, here's Bosun Omofai, our business correspondent.
Nigeria's third quarter 2015 gross domestic product data is now available, showing a growth of 2.84%. The indicator showing the total value of all goods and services produced in the country within a particular period shows its first positive reading since 2015. Leading the growth were the oil sector, trade services, agriculture output, the financial services and insurance, as well as manufacturing. The July to September growth were, however, sluggish and even negative in the sectors of accommodation and food, arts and entertainment, and even real estate. But the country's public sector remains a drag on the economy, showing a negative 12.78% in real terms. In nominal terms, the public administration reported a 4.65% decline in nominal terms, down 2% compared with the second quarter, and lower than third quarter 2014 by 14.55%. The public sector thus contributes just 2.47% to the country's gross domestic product. The poor showing of the public sector on the GDP table would not be surprising to millions of Nigerians. The sector is considered weak and inefficient, over-bloated, taking a chunk of the country's resources but yielding very little in return. For many years, the government has been asked to trim down the size of the public sector and make it more efficient, effective, and productive. Many Nigerians were therefore not surprised when President Muhammadu Buhari merges some ministries as he formed a new cabinet. And more of such could be in the offing.
Joining me now on the news at 10 to look at the breakdown and a sector-by-sector analysis is the Managing Director, Financial Derivatives, Mr. Bismarck Rwani. Thank you so much for joining us on the news at 10.
Good evening, Jama.
It's your night, obviously, figures night.
Yes.
And going by the stats that we have,
Yes.
2.84% GDP growth recorded in quarter 3. Is that looking good to you?
Much better. It was 2.35 in the second quarter. So what have we seen here? We've seen a point of inflection. And this was a time when the entire country was on safe mode. In other words, there was no cabinet in the federal government. About 5 states had no cabinet. There was uncertainty after the election, and there was policy uncertainty. In spite of that, you were able to inch out growth, fastest growing agriculture, trade, education, manufacturing, transport and storage. The sectors that are government dependent actually suffered: construction, finance and insurance, public administration. What it tells you, therefore, is that the sectors that are the fiscal dominance of the Nigerian economy is actually declining, and that the private sector is driving this whole process. Secondly, the fears that there was a recession, from slowdown into recession, are now unfounded to the extent that we've seen a growth. And the projection for the rest of the year is that we're going to come up with a growth of about 3.8% for the whole year, which is optimistic, but at least it's a good thing. But the good news is that 2 days before then, we had the inflation numbers out. For the first time in 8 months, we saw inflation actually decline. So rather than having stagflation, you've averted stagflation because inflation has gone down and growth has increased. And so what next? And how does that situate us compared to our other countries? So if you look at Kenya, for example, went up from 4.9 to 5.5. Ghana went from 4.1 to 3.9 in growth. And South Africa went from 2.1 down to 1.2. Indonesia, on the other hand, went up slightly to 4.7. And the United States went up marginally to 2%.
So
now,
where does that place us?
Well, that means that we are growing, at least we're not going down anymore, we're going up, but not fast enough. Now that you have a cabinet, now that you have policymakers, now that you have an economic team that will keep the fiscal house in order, you have an infrastructure team that will target the bottom and the middle of the pyramid, and then you have an enforcement and anti-corruption team dealing with enforcement and institutional issues, you are likely to see some sustainability of the growth trajectory.
Let me just ask you, analyze for us what's going on in the electricity and gas sector. We see it up by 4.55%. And when I was looking at the report from the office, the statistics office, it said that this particular sector has been able to limit some production cost increases by manufacturers. Is that what we actually see?
No, that is the truth. Public power supply is at least 3 or 4 times cheaper than alternative power. We've gone from 1,800 megawatts to 4,500 megawatts. And the downtime, at least in the Lagos metropolis, is gone from, we had about almost 75% downtime to about almost 35% downtime. You have power at least 2/3 of the time. So price of diesel has come down from 160 to 102. And diesel is used to power generators. Diesel is used to power transport goods. And that is why rural inflation and urban inflation, you find that the difference is coming down because the cost of transporting goods has actually gone down. So to a large extent, power supply has increased productivity, productivity has increased output, and money supply has been muted. Therefore, you have inflation. So the next number that is going to come out is on Friday when you have the unemployment numbers. Okay. If inflation goes down and unemployment goes down, I doubt that will happen, then the misery index, the number of Nigerians that are miserable, will actually reduce. But I doubt that what you have, as far as I can see, is that the number of miserable people is flatlining.
So right. We're going to have to stop you there because we have yet another analyst that's going to look at some of the figures. Mr. Bismarck Ruwani, thank you so much for joining us on the News at 10. Indeed, we're going to get another perspective on those numbers that I'm talking about tonight. Joining me is a data and information analyst, Mr. Babajide Ogunsanwo. Thanks a lot for joining us on the News at 10.
Thank you, John. It's always a pleasure having to discuss the figures again.
All right, you can hear me. So you heard the economists talk about all the sectors where we seem to be making gains and the areas where the sectors have had a bit of a haircut. How would you interpret all of this?
It depends on how you look at it. You must have heard the story of 2 men and how they looked at the glass of water. If you can see a glass of water here, one person will look at it and say the glass is half full. Another person will look at it and say this glass is half empty. So if you look at the GDP results as compared to last quarter, you see good news, a growth rate of 9.19% in the last 90 days. The bad news is if you look at where we were this time last year, the growth rate is only 2.84%. Now the sad news is that the government wants to achieve an annual GDP growth rate of between 7 to 10%. And the reason why they want to achieve this is to be able to meet up with the promise of 3 million jobs per annum. We remember the last jobs report that was released. We only had 141,368 jobs created within the last quarter. Going by the promise of the government, they want to create an average job rate of 750,000 jobs within the next 90 days. We hope to see that happen when the job results are released on Friday. But what the government wants to achieve, based on its promises, the current GDP rate, especially if you look at it on an annual basis, 2.84% as compared to last year. It will be easier for a camel to go through an eye of a needle for us to have, at this moment, 750,000 jobs within 90 days. What is also interesting from the results that we've seen from the National Bureau of Statistics is there are 3 major ministries that the ministers might be feeling some heat. Look at Kayode Fayemi, 50 years old, is the Minister of Solid Minerals. The metal ore sector shrunk by 32% within the last 90 days. Then we look at Rotimi Amici, is the Minister of Transportation, 50 years old as well. The rail transportation sector shrunk by 37.7% within the last 90 days. And then we look at a very strong minister as well that has come on board, Babatunde Raji Fashola. He is 52 years old, the Minister of Power, Works and Housing. The construction sector within the last 90 days shrunk by 21%. Now, these 3 ministries and 3 ministers will also start feeling the heat based on this new GDP results that have been released. And the reason why I've mentioned their ages in this discussion is because, going by the most recent update from the World Bank, the life expectancy rate in Nigeria is 52 years old. You have Babatunde Raji Fashola is 52, you have Rotimi Amici, and you have Kayode Fayemi, who are 50 years old. So the importance of this is we expect them that they set up younger teams that are effective, productive, and can assist them to achieve the desired results so that they don't cross the red line. We're not suspecting or we're not assuming that they will cross the red line. But if the World Bank says the life expectancy rate in Nigeria is 52, and you have 2, or you have 1 out of these ministers on 52, you have 2 of them that are approaching 52. What we expect is they take life easy, they relax in all their policies, and they don't absorb all the stress. And what they simply need to do is create a younger team that can work with them to achieve the results and the policies that they want to achieve.
All right, data and information analyst Babajide Ogunsanwo, thanks a lot for sharing your thoughts with us on the News at 10 tonight.
Thank you.
Now, when the News at 10 returns, Bayelsa prepares for governorship elections. 2 leading candidates, Governor Seriake Dixon of the PDP and his APC counterpart, Sibikwe Silva, woo supporters and voters. Just stay with us.